I'm Bobbi Sutherland, assistant professor in the Department of History. I think my first experience with Hippocrates was probably in graduate school in a course on medicine and food, and discovering the interconnections between food and medicine in the ancient world, which I had known existed, but not to what extent. So that was probably my first encounter with Hippocrates. Yeah, so Hippocrates is one of the first, and his ideas are continued for centuries by other scholars. And so Galen, the Roman physician, really expands on him. But Hippocrates thought that the body had four humors, and that everything related to these four different humors. And so all foods have these qualities. So the four are set up as hot and cold, wet and dry. And so all foods are either hot or cold, wet or dry. And what you eat then can affect the balance of those things within your body. And this is one of the things that impacts your health. And so one of the ways of helping someone who isn't well is to try to restore the balance with the proper foods. Now, of course, you can also restore the balance by, say, letting out some blood because that's too hot and moist, or, but food is one of the ways of especially maintaining health, but sometimes also improving health. Hippocrates' ideas themselves are clearly not accepted by many physicians, any physicians probably today. We do not think that, oh, you have a cold, then obviously you have too much hot and, or sorry, you have a cold, you have too much cold and moist inside of you, and so we need to counteract this with hot and dry. But what was new and important about Hippocrates was that medicine, to his point in time, was really theology or divinity. It was, if you are sick, there are evil spirits, it's the will of the gods. And he decided, he said there were natural causes to illness. And so although we find some of his ideas very strange, they're still natural. There's still this idea that it's the environment and the person, him or herself, that is, the cause of the illness or the cause of health. So although it seems sort of the opposite of scientific to us now, it really is some of the first scientific medicine. If someone is sick, address what's going on inside their bodies or address the environment. And he starts looking at symptoms and looking very carefully at symptoms. And there is a sort of logic to his diagnosis, even though we wouldn't agree with it. In fact, we still do tend to think you can get a cold from getting cold. And we still use a lot of terms that we get from him, like having a cold, but even things that we say about personality. He also thought that these related to personalities too. And so we say someone's sanguine, or someone's phlegmatic, or someone's all wet, or has a dry sense of humor. And when we talk about food too, dry wine, how can liquid be dry? Well, it's because it has these drying characteristics. Vinegar is dry. And even the way we balance certain things, salad, oil and vinegar are opposites. They're a cold and dry, and a hot and wet. And the salad is, the lettuce is moist and wet, cold and wet, and often the spices and things would be hot and dry. So you're balancing all of those. Sure, so I teach my History 103 class, which is the World in the West class, via food. Mm-hmm. And so when we get to the Greeks and the Romans, I say, you are what you eat. And so Hippocrates is a good example of sort of this, first of all, he's fun because they're all like, huh? So this is a great example of giving them, food is not just stuff you eat. It has all these different meanings. Here it is as medicine, and this is a very different view than we have. But it's also a way of introducing them to the new thinking of the Greeks that was happening in the Greek Golden Age, because Hippocrates is living at the same time as people like Plato, and I'm trying to remember which ones for sure, I think Aristophanes, but a number of the great Greek thinkers are at the same time. And so Hippocrates is one more aspect of that new thinking. So it's a way of introducing them to the Greek Golden Age and the sort of, birth of ancient science and things like that too. I think they should look at it as one of those texts that, yes, it's no longer something we believe, but that doesn't change the fact that it is so crucially important, because if Hippocrates hadn't taken this approach, how much longer would it have taken for people in the scientific revolution to have gone into things in a different way? I mean, these things build on one another. And even Francis Bacon said Hippocrates had it right. He was so close to Bacon's method, which of course is a scientific method. So I think, yeah, they should know he's the father of medicine. I mean, we get the Hippocratic Oath from him. But I think he's a very good example of someone who is still so important, even though we would say he's dead wrong.